Great. So welcome again to the Advocate Funding Project. So this is going to go over the process to apply and also just the program description for the newly launched program from Health Not Prisons Collective. Next slide. So today's agenda, we're going to just introduce you to who HNP is, go over what this project will entail, kind of the expectations of participants and also the hopeful outcomes, go through the application process and timeline, and then leave time for questions at the end. And I am Tyler Barbarin. I'm the policy associate for the Positive Women's Network, and I'm based in New Orleans, Louisiana, and I'll let my other two co-presenters introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. Tammy Haught. I'm the managing director of the Sero Project based in Iowa, and I use she, they pronouns.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kevin Lish, the finance manager at the Sero Project. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm in Idaho.
Great. So the Health Not Prisons Collective is a national collective of 5 partner organizations: the Counter Narrative Project, Positive Women's Network USA, Sero Project, the Transgender Law Center, and the U.S. People Living with HIV Caucus. Next slide. So a little bit about us. We are an intersectional national initiative launched in 2020. Once again, 5 national partners, but we're longtime collaborators, and we're led by, accountable to communities most affected by HIV criminalization. And so our strategy incorporates education and training, grassroots and grass tops organizing, policy analysis and advocacy, legal intervention, and narrative change designed to shift the discourses about HIV, risk, blame, responsibility, and the role of the carceral state, including detention, centering racial and gender justice. So quite a lot, a very diverse perspective, and also diversity of tactics to address HIV criminalization nationally. Next slide. These are our principles, and the website address at the bottom of the slide is where you can find out more about HNP, but we believe in community power and meaningful involvement of people living with HIV, transforming balance of power, vision, and strategic practices of abolition and harm reduction, racial justice, bodily autonomy and reproductive justice, disability justice, healing justice and access, economic justice, and narrative and media justice. Next slide. So these are just some highlights of the things that we've been able to accomplish since beginning in 2020. We have a monthly newsletter, which once again, if you go to the website at the bottom of the page, you can sign up, and it shows kind of the highlights of decriminalization efforts across the country. We feature both the national highlights, but then also state by state. We have been able to do like a bunch of events, I guess, around HIV decriminalization that center the voices of those most directly impacted. So Nothing About Us Without Us is an example of that. We've also provided comments on the federal response to HIV criminalization, and done a series of other projects like Positively Trans. Next slide. The Sero Project was able to launch their national survey of HIV criminalization perspectives. We have the Counter Narrative Project has started a publication called The Reckoning that discusses HIV criminalization. And then most recently, we launched the U.S. People Living with HIV Caucus launched the Demanding Better federal policy agenda. So that's an entire policy agenda that was written by people living with HIV and kind of uplifts some of the priorities, one of which is HIV decriminalization. And then these photos are some of our state work, Virginia and Nevada, because we've been able to successfully support the modernization of HIV laws in those two states. Next slide. So now I believe I'm turning it over to one of my co-presenters to walk through the description of the project.
Thank you, Tyler. And this is Tammy, and I'm going to discuss the project and share some of the specifics about it. So the Health Not Prison Collective Advocates Project is designed to connect advocates that identify as Black, Indigenous, and/or people of color living with HIV to material resources and support in order to successfully participate in state HIV decriminalization coalitions. And for this pilot project, we are starting to offer this opportunity in 4 states: Indiana, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Tennessee. So program overview. Over the course of the 12 months in 2022, 3 chosen advocates from those states, Indiana, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Tennessee, will receive a stipend of $500 a month to participate in state decriminalization coalition work. And economic justice is so important in Health Not Prisons, but also all of the partner organizations. We know that often the only volunteers at these decision-making tables are people living with HIV. And while it's important to have volunteers at the table, volunteering does not put a roof over your head or food in your stomach. So we were so glad that we have this opportunity to provide this stipend so that people living with HIV can be at those decision-making tables. We'll also be connected with seasoned legislative advocates via bi-monthly coaching calls with Health Not Prison Collective partners and monthly workshops to address real-time needs and identify resources. The advocates chosen will also receive a training stipend for development and attending relevant HIV conferences. The expectations of the Health Not Prison Collective advocates will participate in general HIV coalition meetings, take on leadership roles as available within their state coalitions and the subcommittees. We are in no way, shape, or form saying that whoever is chosen is the leader of the state coalitions. We completely support the autonomy and that decision-making process to those state coalitions, but we want to provide this opportunity so that people living with HIV could be at that table and hope that they can take on those leadership roles to help out, because often in many of these coalitions, the leadership are also volunteers. So this is just to provide that support and to provide that mentorship so they can, as available or as needed, take on those leadership roles. The advocates will develop and strengthen their racial justice and gender justice lenses, participate in check-ins with Health Not Prison Collective staff, work with coaches in to problem solve real-time legislative process challenges, and participate fully in the process of HIV decriminalization advocacy during the legislative session. So the timeline at a glance, October 19th, we launched the application through the press release. On November 15th, the advocates application deadline and those applications are due. By late November, we will have reviewed all the applications and successful applicants will be notified. On December 8th and December 17th, we need anyone who applies to save the date and mark their calendars now. On December 8th from 3 to 4 Eastern time, we will have the first orientation meeting. On December 17th from 3 to 4 Eastern will be the second meeting. So if you apply and are selected to be one of the HMP advocates, we need you to be available on those 2 dates at that time for those orientation meetings. Then between January and December 2022, participation in state coalition meetings, state HIV decriminalization activities, and monthly Health Not Prison Collective advocate calls will be required. Late in the year in 2022, we will have the opportunity for the advocates to present on their learnings and next steps for their state coalitions. Here's a more detailed timeline showing when those orientation webinars are, and then the coaching sessions along with check-ins. And we will be providing these slides when we send out the recording so that you can look at the timeline more carefully. And I will pass it on to Kevin.
Okay, great. Now we're going to go through the application and how to apply. So if you would advance it to the next slide, Tammy, I'd appreciate it. So again, to find the application, you can go to Positive Women Network USA's website. And as you can see on the bottom of each slide, the direct link to the application is down at the bottom of each slide. And then also when you get the slides, this will lead you to, if you go just to the Positive Women's Network, how to get there through the dashboard and other screens. Go ahead to the next slide, please. Okay, so the first part of the application, you're gonna open the application and you're gonna see a brief description of the reasons we're doing this and what the goals of the project are. And then you're going to start into the application, and it's pretty simple. We're going to ask you to give us things in the first section like your email address, your name, which pronouns you like to use, and we have listed a few that you can choose from, or there's another category there too. We then need your address and phone number. Again, your email address. Thank you. And then the next question is which state coalition you belong to and the amount of time you've worked in that state coalition. Okay. And then you're going to start into the actual application questions. The first one will be, please describe your experience, level of involvement in your current state coalition. And that will be a short answer, and just give us the information of how you've been involved. And again, any questions here in a second, there will be email addresses if you think of one after the questioning, after we open it up for questions. But again, we're here to help as you go through this application. The next one will be what led you to becoming involved in your state coalition? And please give us all the answers that you can think of. That's going to help us all better recruit people just like you to all coalitions working on HIV decriminalization. The next question we're going to ask you to describe to us is, have there been challenges or barriers to your coalition work that having a coach can support? Please describe them. If none, just enter none and move on to the next question. Again, we are trying to be very collaborative with each state coalition that has been prioritized to belong in this program. And so we're going to give you an opportunity to tell us what kind of training can best support you if chosen for this program. The next question, are there any partners or potential collaborators that are missing from your coalition? Who's actively involved? Again, we're going to ask for a little information from your perspective on how we can begin to provide support to broaden the reach of your coalition. The fifth question is, in what ways has your coalition been supported in developing and strengthening racial justice and gender justice? If it hasn't, what resources would help your coalition accomplish that? Again, please tell us in your own words what you think would be the best way to support racial and gender justice in your coalition. And we will take that into consideration during the introduction meetings in December. Next slide, please. Okay. The sixth question is, please tell us about the structure of your coalition. Who's your chair or co-chairs? Are there any outside facilitators used in your coalition meetings? Tell us a little bit about how your coalition meets. Tell us when it meets. Are there regular meetings? Fill us in so we can get a great perspective of what's going on in your state. The seventh question, please provide an example of how your coalition has received support or been able to access and address opportunities to meaningfully engage people living with HIV, BIPOC folks, gender nonconforming folks, and trans people. Again, please let us know what's going on. I'm sorry, I should have turned the page before I quit reading. That also includes immigrants, sex workers, and people with disabilities. Again, give us some perspective on things we could do to support you to make sure that we have all voices at the table, and that your coalition is well-rounded and thinking about everyone living with HIV, so no one is left behind. The eighth question is, has your coalition had support in strategic planning in either coalition building or legislative strategy? Tell us a little bit about what training you've had before. So that will let us know whether we need to kind of start from scratch in your state, or if we can build upon some strategic planning training you've already had. Number 9, how is MIPA, meaningful involvement of people living with HIV/AIDS, influence your coalition work and experience? And again, please just tell us how MIPA has helped you in your work to this point, and we will again help you build a program that's appropriate for your state. Next slide, please. Okay, this is an agreement. By typing your name at the end, you're agreeing to the following things if selected for this program: to participate in orientation on December 8th from 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern, and that's December 8th of 2021. You are also committing to a monthly call with a technical assistant coach, and you are committing to bi-monthly calls with the Health Not Prisons coordinator. And the next field is typing your name, where you are going to agree to the 3 things we just went over. Okay, Alicia, I see you put a question in the chat box. If you don't mind, we'll get to that as soon as we're done going through the application. And then the last field we're going to ask you to give us is the date of the application, just so we know it's timely. And that is the application. Next slide.
So, Kevin, I do want to address this question because it does kind of reflect, it also, there's implications for what you just read. So I know folks are looking at the application and there's a lot of questions about, tell us about your state coalition or work that you've already done. But we do encourage folks who are not currently part of a state coalition to also apply. So Alicia, your question about if you're not a part of a coalition currently, can you still apply? Yes, if you reside in one of the target states. So all the questions that Kevin just read through with you all, answer them to the best of your ability, but also if you are not currently part of a state coalition, write that into the short answer. That's why the short answers are open for you to be able to tell us, this is an area that I'm interested in learning more about. This is an area that I, don't yet have knowledge of. So it's totally okay if you are not currently part of a coalition, but are interested still in the program. Please still fill it out.
Yeah, and I agree. I'll just give you a quick example. I lived with HIV for the first 16 or 17 years before I ever knew that Idaho had a criminalization law. There's lots of reasons why folks might not be involved up to this point. And again, just be honest and tell us why you haven't been. I would assume that a lot of people who have not been involved yet, it's because they couldn't even imagine that laws like this exist. I certainly couldn't when I learned about it. Again, for tips on how to do this, here is the web address that you'll have once a quick web address for the application and program description. You can download or print the application instructions and have them in front of you as you complete your application. And then you can type out your answers to the 8 questions in Word document and then copy and paste your responses into the online form. That is something that I always have to do because I am the world's worst speller. And yeah, thank God for spell check. And then take your time to answer the questions. They're not due until next month. And again, there's 8 essay questions. Think them through thoughtfully. And please use them to convey your interest in the program and how you might help your state coalition. And again, as Tyler just said, if this is your first time thinking about getting involved in HIV decriminalization, let us know and tell us what is driving your interest. Make sure you have a secure internet connection when you're pasting your response, and you're going to upload your application. It's always great to make sure that your information is safe when you're online, and look for that S behind HTTP. When you are on an HTTPS site, you know that your information is secure and can't be stolen. Next slide.
Can I step in here just for 1 second with one extra tip? I want to encourage one that you take your time and you first do answer the questions in Word, but something very important, a tip that I have found: bullet points. Bullet points are a wonderful thing. You don't need to write a full sentence. We want you to be as short and concise, but specific as possible. And bullet points are a great way to help convey a message. And it makes it a little bit easier sometimes for reviewers. And if you do bullet points, then to me, you can be more specific with your answers in the bullet points without having, sometimes if you write a full sentence, you can tend to ramble on. So bullet points help to make you be more concise with your answers, and it does make it help easier for reviewers as well, or at least for this reviewer.
That's a great point, Tammy. Thank you. And because I should have mentioned that, because that is exactly how I would answer these questions, is by using bullet points. Carrie Foote put a question in again that that some people applying may not know how to answer the questions about how a coalition in their state is structured. And again, just tell us that. Tell us, this is your first time in considering working with your HIV criminalization coalition. And don't feel bad if you don't know what the structure is. You might want to describe a structure of a coalition you have worked in that's been successful. But don't worry if you don't readily feel like you know the answers to the questions. Again, let us know what your interests are in applying, and how you feel you can help your coalition, and how you can help people living with HIV in your state by getting rid of these god-awful laws. Next slide. And a reminder of the key dates again. The application is due on November 15th. We're going to announce the 3 folks selected on November 26th. And please remember the mandatory orientations. You may want to put these tentatively on your calendar today, of December 8th and December 17th. Next slide, please. And then questions. Here are email addresses. Again, when you get the slides, you'll have these 4 email addresses available to you. Please reach out with any and all questions. I know you've heard this 1,000 times before. There's no such thing as a bad question, and we're serious about that. You know, this is definitely an opportunity to begin the coaching process with the application. If you have any questions, please reach out to one of the 4 of us. Next slide.
That is our last
Was
slide.
that this last? Okay, great. Okay, so let's open it up for questions.
So
No.
Carrie asked, how brief is brief? Short paragraph, 2 sentences. Is 2 paragraphs too long? I don't think there's such a thing as too detailed or too much information. I think as much as you're able to share or want to share to convey your interest is fine. But to Tammy's point, like if you don't have a lot to write about, you don't have to, you know, stretch it out longer than necessary. Like 1 to 2 sentences or a short paragraph is perfectly fine. I think we're just trying to emphasize, answer everything to the best of your ability. And once again, if you need help or, you know, are unsure if you've answered a question, feel free to reach out to any one of us and we can help clarify on an individual basis.
Any other questions?
Well, thank you all for attending, and we really appreciate your interest in this program, and we hope that hope to see your applications and look forward to learning a little bit more about you as individuals. Once again, we're going to send out the copy of the slides to everyone who attended, and potentially the recording, I guess, since we recorded this. And feel free to reach out to anyone from Sarah or from PWN if you have any additional questions. But thank you so much for spending 30 minutes with us.
Thank you all.
Thank you.